this is a cool idea and I wanted to share it with you. And in some sense, it's both literal and metaphorical. So this is what I'm talking about. Like it's parts like particles. Like most of us are probably aware with particles, these little constituents of matter, which are smaller than the atom, and everything is made up of. And they're being studied in particle physics with all kinds of crazy experiments that kind of like scatter things with each other and they bounce off and make new particles and, what's. And at the same time, I don't know how many people are familiar with the idea of parts. So this is a term that comes from psychology. And this term, what is really about, what it really refers to, it refers to a model according to which we can look the human mind and human behavior. And this model is revolving around the idea that we have different aspects of our personality. There are different sides of our personality, and this can be thought as little independent people living inside us, like different sub-personalities, which make up our whole personality, and essentially they serve us in the present moment, as we exist in the present moment. And these are called sometimes ego states, sometimes parts. Many times people hear about these ideas in the context of internal family systems or constellation therapy. A very common one that's being referred very often, even in spiritual settings, is the highest wisdom or the inner child. Sometimes when people talk about trauma, they refer to the inner child. Traditionally, in humanity, we have been trying to codify this through all over the centuries and the millennia, and that's where archetypes fit in. That's where archetypes fit, like different deities and all these things. They're essentially externalizations of central aspects of a system in terms of human representation. And something similar are parts, these aspects of our personality. So in more practical terms, let's say we all examine how we behave differently when we are at work or when we are with our family or when we are with a friend. And sometimes how we behave differently when we are with one friend versus another friend. And so all these essentially are different little aspects of our personality. And sometimes there are parts inside us that trigger certain emotions in certain situations. And that's the general idea. And of course, this is not some abstract thing. It is just a model which essentially refers to specific activations of the neurology we have in our brains, and basically, and how this neurology gets activated, and what stable configurations of this neurology appear in certain circumstances, appear to be activated. So that's the idea about parts. Now, this is very interesting, and this is like the literal part, like that the name of parts sounds like the one of particles in particle physics. So as we have, right, independent aspects of personality, we also have like distinctive constituents of matter, the particles. And particles, of course, can be sometimes we think of fundamental particles, but there are also composite particles. Like, for example, the proton is made from three quarks. And quarks are fundamental. Quarks, at this point in time at least, we don't think they're made from anything else. And the electron is another fundamental particle. Basically, it's so small, we can't see if there is made of something. So we think it's fundamental. Basically, it's smaller than the deeper we can see with our experimental detectors. And of course, there is like string theory and all these ideas of where all this zoo of particles may be coming from. That's another thing. At the same time, let's stay here now on the idea that basically we have distinctive aspects of personality and distinctive aspects of matter. So sometimes people have the tendency to think that the parts of personality it's fixed and they have only specific representations and specific names. That there is this, and this. However, what I've personally found is that actually parts behave a lot like particles. So essentially, when we talk with someone, when we interact with a situation, it's like we are doing a scattering experiment in particle physics, and according to how uh, the interaction is focused and the energy of the interaction, different parts pop up. And these different parts that pop up, they may be like really deep parts hidden inside us. Let's call them fundamental parts in some sense. Or there may be a composite part, which is made of other parts. And the idea is that what shows up is what is particular for the situation. So when we engage with questions with people and back and forth and focus on the same topic and kind of narrow down our interaction, we are kind of bringing forward, according to the context of the situation, a specific part, which it doesn't matter if it's made of others or if it is by itself, because it is what's appropriate for the same at this moment. That's the idea. We don't need to reach some notion of fundamentality, because the idea of parts in the mind is just a model. We're just working with the phenomenology of the mind. And even the idea of particles, it's still a phenomenological idea, because there are composite particles which are made of others, and there are fundamental particles which we think as fundamental because we can't see deeper. But truly, even the idea of a particle is just a model. It's an abstraction we create to study a specific configuration of matter we find. But then, right, we talk about other ideas behind, like that particles can come from quantum fields or even from strings, that they rise up from something else. So even the idea of particle is an abstraction that allows us to study something and not really fundamental. It's fundamental to the degree we want to examine certain things, and it isn't even to the degree we don't want to consider certain things. And the same thing is for parts, the aspects of our personality. So there is this idea that sometimes we have to really dig into. This comes from a lot of impressions from psychoanalysis that's really, it's being regurgitated in social media by all these, oh, you have trauma people. And and basically that you really have to dig and find the wounded inner child and all that, in order to be better and be in some eternal search of all your traumas, which, I'm sorry, simply it doesn't have to be like that. In some cases, it is like that. In some cases, we have to go there, but in some other cases, we don't. And the thing is, we do our scattering experiment and we find the right energy with our questions to work with the issue that's being presented. And that's the idea. And we really don't have. There's also this idea of the root cause. This fundamentality idea is also psychology. We have to find the root cause. It's like we have to find the fundamental particles. No. We don't have to find with the fundamental particles. We have to work with what is presenting and go as far as we need to go in order to resolve it. We don't need to search for fundamentality to solve practical problems at the level of human experience, because in the end, we care to improve things at the level of human experience, not do some deep scattering experiment and in LHC and form a black hole, for example. Well, there are no black holes formed there. It was just a metaphor from the panic people were creating. It may happen. So the idea here is we just need what shows up according to the appropriate energy. And as particles interact and transmute between each other and combine and recombine and separate, and there are some we know, some we don't know, and they all emerge from some underlying structure, which we haven't found yet in science fully. So the same idea is for parts, aspects of our personality. They interact with each other, they separate, they merge, and what appears is what's appropriate for the situation we're working on, and we need to work only with what's appropriate for the situation. We don't need to always go to the inner child. We don't always going to need to go to deep. Sometimes we need to, and that's absolutely fine. It's just we have to have an open mind about what shows up. And of course, all this comes up from an underlying neurology that's in our head, that has been formed throughout our life, from all the influences of our life. And that's why each one of us has a different constellation of parts in our head. There's no some universal laws of nature here, because each one has inside us our own universe, our own reality, our own uh, laws of nature. And when we interact with other people, when we interact with a specialist and we go deep with questions, then we do these experiments, these scattering, probing experiments that allow us to get awareness about our own inner laws, the way we operate. So that way we can function better in our everyday lives. That's what parts like particles is all about, and the phenomenology of the mind. And if you like this video, please just like and subscribe for more. Thank you.